Hello, and welcome to Worried About Nothing. Today we are going to talk about depression. My name's Danielle.
And I'm Kim.
And I'm Katya.
Welcome to our show today. So, depression. I know it's something I've dealt with in my life. How about you guys? You've experienced depression?
I don't think I've experienced depression to the extent where I can't really lift myself out of the bed. Sometimes I had symptoms of depression where it was really hard to get up, and it was really a lot of pull to get myself out, but not to the point where there's nothing I can do to get myself out. And I know some people were in this situation, but I would still try to find something that would get me on throughout the day. So, for example, in my case, I know kids need breakfast, right? So even though I can survive without breakfast and stay in bed because I'm feeling like, depressed, right? And I don't want to do anything. Well, I know that I have other drivers feeding the kids, right, that would get me out of bed. I've had a few friends who talked about depression. One of them, for example, was saying that she worked for many years and she had 2 jobs at the same time, and it also involved a lot of night shifts and not enough sleep. So she had severe lack of sleep for a prolonged period of time, I don't know, X amount of years. And after that, she felt that she also had 2 kids, but she felt like she had a depression and she couldn't lift it. And every morning it was just such a challenge to just get up and keep moving. And she would always have to push herself. It was just so much struggle. I mean, her way of solving things was to go on a pill. I did suggest to do meditation, but she tried it a couple of times and she said, well, it's not really working because you really need to put a lot more effort into that. And I can see it's being a hard work. And if you're already in that state, then of course it requires extra hard work. But she went on a pill and it really helped her. I think, I cannot talk from my personal experience because I've never went on the pill, but to me, doing regular meditations and just switching the point of view. So for example, if I'm feeling depressed, if I feel like I don't want to leave, just quickly switching it as saying, oh, the day is wonderful, everything is beautiful, and just switch the mind, the way it thinks, it really helps. And try to refocus myself. And it's like a constant training to refocus myself, not to go back to that depression that just wants to suck you in. Anyway, that's really what worked for me.
Yeah, I think with depression, I guess it can depend on how severely you feel depressed, and also outside circumstances. Like you said, if you have kids, you have to get up, you have to do things. But then I suppose some people don't even care about that. But I guess it can be helpful to pull you out of it. But if you hear about people sometimes who are very depressed, who are on their own, they have nobody that they live with, nobody they need to get up and live for, as it were. And so there's no sort of driver to push them to do things.
I would say the best part is really trying to find something that really excites you. So, how we talk about cycles of dissolution and rebirth, right? So from my understanding, and I might be wrong, depression is being stuck in the cycle of dissolution. So you need to pull out of the cycle and move to the cycle of rebirth. So you need to have some new creative ideas, something that you can be excited about, and try to push in that direction constantly. I'm sure it's a lot of hard work, but it has to be done. So for example, if you're excited about, again, I'm going to take cooking as an example, right? So if you're excited about that, then maybe create some ideas of what you can cook for the day. Have some plans, having some, or maybe do something that you've never tried before. I don't know, do some paintings or something that gets you out of that cycle, something that might be exciting, or even go to the shop and buy some new clothing and just feel better in it. And just try to create a new you that is out of that old cycle. And I think that breach is the one that might be quite hard to cross, but it needs to be done to get out of that cycle.
Yeah, I guess that, yes, I guess that would work for if the depression wasn't hugely severe, the way that if you have moments of depression or you're feeling depressed for a moment or a day or a few days, that kind of thing, I think could, snap you out of it or shift you. But I think some of the more deeper depressions or the kind of more heavy, all-encompassing depressions, those kind of things might not work for, because they can be like overwhelming waves, So you hear about people who are depressed for years and years and years who still function, but it's like there's no color in the world. I've known some people, including people close to me, who are always at a certain level of depression. There's always a low grade view of life. So there's no enthusiasm in anything. There's no joy. There's no excitement about anything. So they can pretend to be excited, or they can try something new or explore something or laugh and smile. But underneath, there's just this foundation of depression. And with that kind of thing, I don't know, is there a solution to snap out of it or shift out of it? I don't know, because I've never experienced it to that level, but I certainly have had experiences of feeling depressed for a number of days, or sometimes maybe a couple of weeks. And in that state, everything looks very bleak and there's no positivity. So even trying to find enthusiasm for something is difficult because you don't feel it. There's no pull to it. And I guess with depression, there are certain things, certain factors. So some of it can be hormonal, some of it can be diet, some of it can be stress or whatever, like your friend who was going through depression, but a pill helped her. I guess sometimes that can help. But I think for me, whenever I feel that level of depression, I always want to try and sit it through. There's a sense of just not wanting to just push it under the carpet, because I think that can happen. Sometimes if people struggle with depression regularly, and they're coping, it's kind of like putting a brave face on it. And I think that doesn't necessarily help. I think if it's a milder depression, definitely you can pull yourself out of it. But if it's deeper than that, I think it probably can be a bit dangerous to kind of push it under the surface, because that's kind of denying it and not acknowledging that it's there. And the root cause will always be there, I guess, if you don't look at it. Not that you want to wallow in it, but it's that fine line, I guess, of not wanting to be in it, but at the same time, allowing it to be there, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. So you have to acknowledge. You can't just put a brave face and say, oh, I'm not depressed. It has to be acknowledged that there is a depression. And if it's a really deep depression, as you say, I'm not a doctor by any means. And it's really hard for me to give an advice because I personally haven't experienced those very deep depressions, but I have experienced mild depression. So in those situations, I can say what worked for me. And as I said, in the case of my friend, there was a pill, although I still think there is other ways. But if you really need to get out, if you need to take a pill for a short time and then to get out of there and then move to other methods, by no means I'm saying you shouldn't do that either.
It's been explained to me before that depression can be a result of different things. So there are different types of depression. So there's depression that's like lethargic, where you just don't want to do anything and it's very heavy. And that to me is the type of depression you can then, choose to do something creative, and it kind of works to force yourself into doing something, into action. And then there's another form of depression, or another cause of depression, which kind of comes from an overactivity, which is where mine normally comes from. It's like the mind spinning. And it's like it ends up just being so exhausting that it causes the depression, because then there's like no energy to do anything. And in that state, at least I've noticed that if I'm trying to figure it out or trying to get myself to do something, it just makes it worse, because it's like trying to push past the lack of energy by using more energy, which didn't work for me. And I've been told to just kind of actually rest through some of it. And I guess it would be more of like the approach that Kim had mentioned, is like you just kind of like allow it to be there instead of trying to do anything with it or force yourself into any type of action.
And there's also the manic depression as well, which is another form, I guess. I've seen people that have that, and it must be exhausting. I guess it's more like the second type you mentioned, Danielle, in that running on high energy, everything's very heightened, and then suddenly you crash because you lose all the energy and you just hit the rock bottom. And it's just that bouncing back and forth to some extent. Maybe it's not the same as what you were saying, but it is definitely another form that I've seen.
Right. This was different than that. It's like the depression is actually caused by the energy, and there's not like that high state. I mean, I'm not aware of ever experiencing any types of mania myself, so I can't really speak to what it's actually like. But my understanding is that it's like an energetic thing where I imagine it's like you almost can't sit still. It's like you have to expend the energy somehow. And that hasn't been my experience. I've definitely heard of manic depression. So
Wow, you know quite a bit about the depression. I guess you researched it.
I was just told about it, actually. I had a session with a Rati mine. She told me about my depression. So I didn't even realize that I was depressed. And it's one of those things. I had it happen when I went to my naturopath too. When someone tells you something and it just rings true to you, and it's just like, wow. And like a giant slap in the face to me, because it's like, wow, yeah, I really am depressed, or yeah, I am holding on to life so tightly, but I'm not being able to see it. And for me, it's kind of like a sense of shock. And I get emotional about it because it's like someone else is able to see something so clearly about me, and I'm me, and I can't see it.
It's like we were talking about earlier, if it's always a constant underlying thing, then it's part of you. It's like breathing. So you wouldn't realize that you're breathing differently to anyone else because it's the way you breathe, you know? So I guess that is part of it too. And because I think depression is a lot more common than people necessarily want to admit or acknowledge. And more people have it or have experienced it than would potentially want to speak about it or admit. Because in some ways, depression can be looked at as a bit of a stigma. So it's kind of, you're doing something wrong or you're failing. Whereas it's not that at all, but I think there is that association with it. So in times, for example, when I felt depressed, and it's happened on and off over the years, there's always that sense of, I shouldn't be feeling like this, which is an aversion, it's a pushing away. And I think the reason I said earlier about sometimes just allowing it to be is because, especially in the past, I used to try and pull myself out of it by doing something, by the sort of stiff upper lip British thing is, you know, snap yourself out of it kind of thing. But when you're feeling that way, when you're feeling like there is no point in life and you want to kill yourself, somebody saying snap yourself out of it does not help at all. So I think for me these days, when I feel depression, like I have for the last couple of days, and I think, I don't know whether it's clearing from the retreat or whatever, but I'm just allowing myself to sit with it and just be with it. So I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling there's no point in life. I'm feeling I want to jump out the window. Okay, I know I'm not going to do it, but I'm just going to sit with the feeling of it, because it's obviously coming up for a reason. And the fact that it's coming up is good, because it means I'm not pushing it down. I'm not denying it. And I'm not pretending that everything's okay. And I'm feeling wonderful and sun shining and birds are singing. You know, they are doing that, but I'm just not feeling the joy of it. And that's fine too. You know, it's just something I'm experiencing. So rather than trying to pull myself out of it or push against it or stop it, I'm just going, okay, I'm feeling really crap at the moment, and that's okay too. I'm just going to look after myself. I think part of it's probably a bit of a crash because I've had a really crazy few weeks of work. So now I've got a few days off. My body's just collapsed. So I'm just being gentle and just kind of allowing myself to lie on the sofa when my body wants to, and not stress about things and just feel this depression. And it's good because underneath it, or alongside of the feeling of depression, is a knowing that I'm not depressed. So it's not me. So it's okay. It's just depression is moving through, and just sitting with it and being kind of tender with it as well. So it feels like I'm being quite loving to myself, because I obviously need looking after right now, you know, so I'm looking after myself. And that's quite nice as well. So there's no fighting in it. There's no tension. It's all pretty soft and gentle. So I feel that this depression will pass. I don't know when it will, but it will at some stage. And until then, all I can do is just be with it. In a way, it's kind of like being with it like a friend. It's like, well, depression is part of me right now. So, hello, friend, you know, kind of thing. And it takes away the sharp edges off it. You know, it takes away the stress or the kind of tension out of it, and just allowing it to flow through. And
yeah, it makes sense that we learned as kids that depression is something that you want to avoid. You don't want to experience it, and instead of allowing it, because when I go through shorter cycles or just regular cycles of depression, it's the same, just not trying to push myself out of it. Earlier I was more talking about the prolonged cycle, when you're really being stuck in the cycle and how to get out of it. But if it's just a regular cycle that needs to be experienced by everyone, it's just allowing it, is realizing, yeah, it's okay to be depressed. It's part of life. Who said that I shouldn't be depressed? Who said that I should be always hyperactive? Who said that I should be always doing something? It's okay to experience it. It's not pleasant, that's why sometimes aversion comes in and says, hey, you shouldn't be experiencing it because nothing is being done, you're being lazy, just want to lay down and take it easy, while you could have done so many things. And we learn all about efficiency and how much can be done in one day. And obviously when there's depression, well, it's more about taking care of yourself, right? It's about self-care, taking it easy and not pushing so hard to get something achieved, right, that day. So I think there is also trying to understand where you really feel like you're being stuck in the cycle and you really feel like, okay, I really allowed it to happen, but now I'm moving to the stage where I'm actually enjoying it. Even though you might not enjoy it, but in the way you're okay being in there and you stay there for too long because it's comfortable, right? And then in the way you don't want to get out of it, because that can happen too, even though it's miserable, but it's familiar. And trying to get out of that comfort zone because you've been staying there for too long, well, that's distinguishing that. And I think that's where you probably need to push. But in the situation where it's just a normal cycle, allowing it and accepting it and just being with it, that's the best you can do, really.
Yeah, it's not wallowing in it. It's important also to be very tender with the part of yourself that is feeling the depression. You know, it's an embracing of some aspect of you that you must be pushing away in some way, you know, because depression, for me anyway, I don't know about for everyone else, but for me, it has such strong association with failure and not being enough or not living up to some kind of standard, whatever it might be, you know. So it's not necessarily a clear-cut thing. So it's not, for me, it's not oh, I'm not married and I don't have kids, therefore I'm depressed. It's not that kind of thing. But there's a vague underlying sense of feeling that there's something that I'm not being or doing. And I know that it's irrational, and mentally and emotionally, I know that it's not true, but it's still, that sensation is there. So for me, it's important always to try and be really kind to that part, or kind to myself, because in some way I must have been being too hard on myself in other ways to cause the fact that I feel this depression. Because sometimes, I mean, it's not necessarily always me. Sometimes it can just be a general sense of, well, life is not worth living because it's pointless. And in those situations, instead of trying to talk myself into why it is, there's a point to it, or why, you know, it's important, or why I should carry on living, or any of those things, it's just like, well, so not necessarily trying to pinpoint why I'm feeling that way, but just kind of allowing it, but also not seeing it as a kind of finite thing. So it's not a kind of, oh, it's okay, you'll feel better tomorrow, or something like that. It's just like, well, it's okay, you'll feel this way, and if you feel this way for a long time, you'll feel this way for a long time. It's not stopping me from functioning, so I'm still doing what I need to do. But this time around, somehow, I want to just really let it all come up, let it all move through, because if depression reoccurs, I feel that there must still be some root cause for it. So in the past, I must have not allowed it fully to be, for it to come back, or I've not fully touched on in me why or where it's coming from. So this time I just want to kind of not wallow in it, but I want it to allow it to all just flow through, so I can to let it all go, rather than holding on to the tail end and kind of pulling it back every so often, you know, which is in some ways kind of scary, because there's, you know, the mind says, well, you could feel like this for years, you know, but at the same time, if I do, you know. It feels more genuine to just acknowledge it and look at it and go, okay, well, if I do, I do. I don't want to deny it. I've done too much denying of things. But I think it is important to remember, or for people who are listening who are depressed, just to not reject and deny themselves. Because I think that can be part of depression that makes it even more difficult, is when you are feeling something, you're struggling against it, and also at the same time rejecting yourself because you must be wrong, because it's not about being right or wrong. It's just something that is to be experienced. And in some ways, I feel depression is a way back to yourself. You know, it's a way back to showing you where you're not loving yourself. So in that respect, it's a gift. You know, it's giving you the opportunity to see where you're not being caring towards yourself, or you're not accepting yourself.
And also seeing if there's certain opinions, certain ideas that are too stringent, where you're not willing to bend or accept, or just maybe be a little bit more flexible and maybe accept life as is. Because I heard that point of view that sometimes that could be another reason for depression, for a prolonged depression, just not allowing the life to come through. And I guess it's similar to what you've been talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that case, it's like a judgment that life should be somehow be different than the way it is, or they themselves should be different than how they are. Whatever they're experiencing should be different. And that's kind of can produce that struggle against what's being experienced. So if depression is there, and then there's this fighting against the depression being like, I shouldn't feel this way, it just makes it that much harder. So being able to accept that depression is occurring and really caring for yourself through it. And you said treating the depression like a friend, but say if someone can't see it from that angle, then maybe, see how would you, as the depressed person, take care of your friend or a child who is coming to you and saying, hey, I feel this way. Like, you probably wouldn't be the same way towards them as you would be towards yourself for the most part. So that could be helpful in kind of saying, all right, well, for me, maybe my sister. I'm like, if my sister came to me with this feeling, how would I respond to her? How would I handle her feeling of depression, and kind of get into conversation with myself as if I was talking to her. And that can sometimes help shift perspective and that harsh way of being that we can be with ourselves.
Except in the society, the typical approach is to go and do something fun. Oh, let's go and do some entertainment. Let's, go to one of those roller coasters and feel some excitement, which in that situation might not be what the person needs. And as Kim already discussed, it might be just letting it be and experiencing it fully too. So I think the perspective has to be there too, in a way, not so much, I guess, relying on what we've learned as kids, but more feeling into it, what's actually really your friend, coming from more of a compassionate point of view rather than how can we solve this? How can we fix it?
Yeah, I think it's not looking at it like a problem to be fixed. And then another way that depression, I feel, for me anyway, can be a gift is that it takes you right down beneath all of the other distractions of life, because all of that is unimportant in the moment. And it helps you to focus, if you're willing to do it, just to focus on yourself rather than being pulled by something. So I have to go to this meeting, or I need to do this, or I need to make a call, or I need to, and it gives you that space and time just to be with yourself and just to allow everything you're feeling. All the unacknowledged things that, say, society says are bad to feel, just allows you to feel them. And if you can do that without judging yourself, it's actually quite freeing in a way, because in the moment of feeling the depression and allowing everything you're feeling, all the thoughts and emotions and everything just to move through, everything else just doesn't matter. So there's no pressure from anything or anybody else apart from just being present with it. Not that that's a pressure, but there's just being present with it. And in some ways, for me anyway, these past few days, it's just really felt like it's a heart opening. It's, I guess, like you were saying earlier, Katya, it's going through the dissolution phase. So before the rebirth, there has to be the dissolution. And it feels like this depression is that. So it's the death of a lot of things. It's the death of the old in some ways. It's the death of other things I'm not aware of right now that has to happen. And it's like, the winter has to happen before the spring can come. So it's not that I'm holding on to the fact that spring is coming. It's more of a kind of, well, it's an inevitable part of the cycle. So I'm just allowing it. I'm just being with it. And there's something kind of beautiful about that. It feels very pure. It feels very, in some ways, very loving. And it's very peaceful, as you said. It's very quiet. There's no head noise. There's no directional noise. It's just being quiet. When you don't fight it, or you don't fight against it, and you don't put the stories on top of it, it can be actually quite a not pleasant experience, but an interesting one, a peaceful one. You know, and as the thoughts move through, it's kind of not giving them too much substance. There's something almost sacred about it, because it does feel like the ending of something. And I guess everything is, you know, dissolution is death, so there has to be some sort of death experience, I suppose.
Yeah, I can relate. So there is some sort of, as you say, this peaceful experience. I can't say there is a pleasure in it, because that's the wrong word, but just letting it be. And it's just this, the word that comes to me is kindness to what is happening. And not even just allowing it, not even doing a lot of things, and just taking care of yourself. There is something nice about it too, because it gives you time to actually think about yourself for once, right? What is it that you need? What is it that your body needs? And if it's just being quiet, being, I guess, depressed, if you want to use that word, there is something beautiful about that too. If you can see that beauty, if you can allow this beauty to exist and not so much think what we've learned, oh, you shouldn't experience this, as we already discussed, right? And not pushing it away and not saying, oh, this is ugly, or no, I would rather go and get something productive done. So there is definitely something sacred about it.
Yeah. Yeah, when you don't fight it, there definitely is. Yeah. And I think as well, you know, we were talking about earlier how sometimes if you have this underlying depression, it kind of takes the color out of the world and everything feels, you know, a bit dimmed or muted. And I guess part of it is seeing the beauty in that too. You know, grays, shades of gray can be beautiful. Dusk can be beautiful. You know, it doesn't always have to be golden sunshine and blue skies. And it's just allowing the seasons, I guess, or the different times of the day to move through without preference for one or the other. And there's also, I think, for me anyway, there's a kind of nakedness to feeling depressed, because there's nowhere to hide. There's no kind of surface, you know, there's no kind of mask that you can put on, that the mask of jolliness or whatever it is. And so there's a real delicate fragility to it. You know, it's almost like a naked vulnerability, because you're just feeling what you're feeling and just being in that space of it without trying to be anything else, or you don't have the energy or the desire to do anything else or be anything else. And that's quite cleansing in a way as well. And I guess it's like, you know, Ratima says about depression and spirituality, that, you know, sometimes when you're at that low point, that depression, that feeling of what's the point in life, that's when your spiritual journey can start, really, because you've hit that point of not fighting against anything and you're open to what is more.
Oh, I guess you've hit the point where nothing excites you, right? There is, like, if let's say you win $1 million, you might not be excited about it, because, or you might be excited for a short period of time and then you come back to this depression. So there's really nothing in life that holds you. So you've really reached that point, as you said, Kim, and then you're ready for the spiritual journey to begin. And seeing things from a different perspective. Just looking at it, oh, it could be that I'm ready for the spiritual work, instead of looking at it as the symptoms of depression and what can I do about it? Can I find a solution? Just switching the point of view might help too. It's like, oh, okay, this is happening, oh, this is normal. Oh, okay, I didn't know that many people experience it. I thought it was just me. I think that can help.
Yeah. And I think even the very fact of acknowledging that you might feel depressed is a good first step, because I think a lot of people can go through life having that underlying depression that they deny or they don't even realize is there, because they've pushed it down or they've not looked at it. So I think just even acknowledging that you're feeling depressed can be a big step, because it's almost like a relief then, because subconsciously or semi-consciously or even consciously, you might then go, oh, I don't have to keep pretending anymore. You know, I can just put that one down. Oh, God.
And what you just talked about reminded me of a girl that I knew, and she couldn't be by herself. So she would need to always be with the friends. She couldn't just even be with herself for a short period of time. And to me, that feels, I don't know if she was depressed or not underneath, but to me, it feels like she didn't want to experience anything that was happening. And she was trying to find friends to just be distracted from whatever is happening within her.
Yeah.
Because that neediness in somebody to be with somebody, that neediness, needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I've known people like that as well who can't be alone for more than an hour, and an hour is an eternity, and not being able to spend that time just with yourself, being scared to just be with yourself. There's some denial there. I mean, it can go the other way, people that want to spend all their time on their own. There's something not quite balanced there as well.
Finding the balance, right? And the same as we talk about depression, because it can be confusing. So when do you actually allow it, and when do you want to snap out of it? So it's finding that balance, seeing if, sure, you might need to accept it first, but also at which point you feel that it's been going on for too long and you really need to do something to get out of there too. Again, life is all about balance.
And I think it's also about truthfulness, in that if you're feeling depressed and you have that sensation of feeling depression, if it's true and you allow it and you be with it, that's one thing. But if you are feeling something that, I don't know quite how to formulate this, but the way that sometimes some people might claim to be depressed or say they're depressed and demand others fix them, or demand others do something for them, or try and manipulate others into guilt, into taking care of them or not neglecting them in inverted commas or something like that. That's not the right way to deal with it, because that's not looking at it, that's not being with it, that's trying to put it onto others, trying to blame others for it, or trying to, in some ways, trying to deny it as well, because you're using it as a tool to get others to do what you want. And it can't be about that. It can't be a manipulation. And sometimes people can hit out as well if they're feeling depressed. That it's almost as if they feel bad, they want everyone else to feel bad too. That's not the best way to deal with it either.
Anyway, it's like controlling life, right? So you want to be in control of what's happening. So you want to be in control of your depression. And if I'm feeling depressed, you must feel depressed. And if you start telling me that I'm not depressed, or if you start telling me how easy to get out of it, well, then you don't know anything about it. Then why are you even talking? So it's a form of control. Anyway, that's how I see it.
No, absolutely it is. And then even trying to control the depression, the depression will take this form and that form, or it will last 2.5 days and then it'll be over. All of that stuff I think you have to let go of the control of.
And maybe if I'm just thinking about it out loud, that if you really allow the depression to just be and fully allow and fully experience it, then it shouldn't theoretically be a prolonged depression unless you have a true attraction to it. And you're really attracted and you want to stay in it. But if there's no attraction and aversion and you just let it be, then it should just pass and the new cycle should begin. That's my understanding of it anyway.
Yeah. If you're in the healthy cycle of it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think, it's important to not hold on to it, because people do use it as a form of either self-flagellation or hitting out of the world, and any reason that makes you want to hold on to the depression. Because some people really do, because like you said earlier, Katya, it feels comfortable or it's familiar, or in some ways gets them the results they want. They get pity, they get sympathy, they get people doing things for them, whatever it might be. Any of that needs to be let go of. But just being with it, allowing it to move through. But if you really do, I feel that with me, like I said earlier, I've felt the depression, but there's been some element of either wanting to push it away or for it to end. So I've not fully allowed it to move through in the past. This time, I want to do that. I want to let it go. Just want to allow it to be fully.
But it's challenging. I can see where the challenge is the same for myself. The first thought that comes is like, okay, I must do something about it. And then I was like, well, do you really? Maybe it's okay. And then I don't like nothing. Even if I try to do something, it's just not happening. So even if I try to do something, the motivation, there's no excitement, there's no light in there. There's no inspiration. So even if I try to do it, nothing happens out of it. So I was like, okay, I think I should just let it be. And hopefully when I feel more inspirational, then I'll come back to it. But again, for me, the challenge is make sure it doesn't happen for years, right? Because it shouldn't happen for years. So if it started happening for months and months and months and there's no inspiration, well, it's a sign that maybe something I need to change, because the depression shouldn't last that long, right? Not that it should or should not, but you feel that you're being stuck in that. I don't know if that makes sense. You know this is true, that it's been going on for too long.
I think as soon as you have the awareness of it, then it's a different thing. But like, for example, my dad was depressed the whole time I knew him. There was this underlying depression always. And I don't even know if he was really aware of it, or he put a brave face on it, in inverted commas. But if you do that and you don't really acknowledge it, it comes out in different ways, So for him, it came out because it has to come out. You can't kind of keep something so completely contained and suppressed and controlled. It bursts out and it comes out health-wise, So for him, some aspects of it were that his health was really affected and his physicality was affected. So it is important, I think, to acknowledge it and to allow it to come up, to move through.
Danielle, what is your experience after Aratima told you that you have underlying depression? What has helped you?
Well, it was more that she just told me that the cause of my depression was more of a Vata depression. So then I didn't have to feel like I had to pull myself out of it anymore, because it was caused by too much pushing to begin with. So that was helpful in that way, to be able to recognize when I was depressed why that approach didn't work for me. And I could stop trying to do that. So that was helpful. Yeah, because I don't know if I really experience the other type of depression at all. And if I do, I think it's a little bit easier, because I do feel like there is that ability to find something that creates the kind of spark of wanting to move outward again, where that's not the case if I'm experiencing the other type of depression.
And can you maybe talk a little bit about Vata, Pitta, and Kapha for our listeners who are not familiar with Ayurveda?
All right, I'll just say Vata is it tends to be have a lot of movement. It's an air and ether qualities, so it's a lot of movement, ungroundedness, stuff like that is Vata. Lots of thinking. And then the other type of depression is actually more of a Kapha depression, which is the tamasic, right? Which is heavy, slow moving, like a boredom depression. It's very slow and sluggish. If you're depressed, but your mind's still going like a mile a minute, it's probably a Vata depression. That's what I would say. But if it's you're just depressed and just really kind of like a blob and just there, that's more of a Kapha depression. Thank you for listening to our conversation on depression. If you have any experiences with depression that you'd like to share with us down below, or things that have worked for you in the past, please leave us a comment. And please remember to like this video, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.